we're going to kick off with a bit of a talk about failing fast. So we talk a lot about failing fast, and it's turns into a bit of a buzzword. Yeah, let's fail fast. But how do we actually do that? Like, how does that actually come into being? How do we create the conditions in order to fail fast and do the things that enable us to learn fast, which is what it's all about? So Simon's here to tell us about that. Simon Jackson, he's a data consultant, helping businesses significantly improve performance with data. He's a data science expert with over 13 years experience, having held senior technical and leadership positions at giant titans like Meta, what am I talking about? Booking.com and Canva. So we got a lot of experience here. Welcome, Simon.
All right, thank you. It is a pleasure to be here. And I'm going to start off with this message, which I think you should all feel pretty deeply, and that there are no guarantees in product. No matter how much research we do, how many customers we speak to, everything is a test. We want to de-risk those tests, but everything is a test. And so today I just really want to share some stories of how things have gone really well, sometimes really badly in unexpected ways, to help you think about how do you test your ideas in market. So a little bit about me. I felt this was topical. As of 5 weeks ago, I'm the proud father of 2 girls. Thank you. Her name's Molly. She's gorgeous. But this is why my eyes are bloodshot, and you will see me either with caffeine or possibly passed out in the corner. Feel free to come wake me up. But professionally, I was a decision scientist, and I'm going to skip through this because Ant gave a great intro. I've worked in data science at some of those big tech companies. I think we can all appreciate at this time of the day that if I didn't have AI in my title these days, I would maybe just vanish into thin air, I don't know, so it's there now. And most of what I'm going to share today are things that I've observed at those companies in those contexts, because at each of them I was responsible for helping to build experimentation platforms and scaling them to running thousands of tests in parallel. Most of that is A/B testing. So I heard some people say they haven't always seen A/B testing or been exposed to it. If you want to get a feel for it, I'm around, come and chat with me. And now I'm an independent consultant, and I flew in from Sydney yesterday. All right, these are the lessons I would like to share through stories. I'm going to reference Toke's talk earlier to say these are from a particular context. This isn't necessarily Silicon Valley. I hope you take from them interesting insights, but of course do things in your way and celebrate your way of testing. Let's start small. I found that small changes can have really big effects. And I've literally seen one-word copy changes earn millions and millions of dollars for some big companies. And so you can use this knowledge to your advantage. And I would very much call out, ignore this lesson at your own peril. And I'm going to share some examples. So I got a little annoyed with my bank because of a few words. Also, I noticed Kirsten, your other Australian speaker, used the same asterisk language in her talk. So if you learn nothing else today, it's that Australians like to swear. Right. I was using their async messaging, and it said, responses may not be immediate. I'm like, oh, cool. So it might be immediate. The next day, I'm still waiting around for a response. I'm like, hey, where are you? Does this work? And then I called customer support. So I ended up duplicating the load on the customer support team and being a pretty unhappy customer. Had they maybe set my expectations differently with responses may come in the next 24, 36 hours, whatever it might be, then I would have been a little different. I worked at Canva, and I love Canva. I'm a big power user, and I used to use this thing called the Content Planner, which is where you can schedule things to go out in social media and that sort of thing. And it used to exist on the sidebar, but the space got a little bit messy, and so it got collapsed into this apps bucket. Seemingly innocent change, Now, those of you who are building products with power users know power users don't like change. And when you work in experimentation, you change a lot of shit. There you go. You change a lot of things and usually annoy power users. And so rather than trying to just figure out what had happened, people like me and all the power users got really annoyed and put, again, a whole bunch of load on customer support. Where is this thing? I need it. I use it every day. It's gone. Seemingly innocent, but it caused a lot of frustration in the community. Some examples I've de-identified, but you can probably guess. So then all of some big tech companies' measurement technology went down, and this was core to their massive amounts of revenue, just because of one upstream dependency. One line of code got changed, and those measurement errors absolutely spiked, just from some really innocent little thing. Luckily, at the time, we were tracking errors in a very reliable way, so we could identify the problem and work our way back to the dependency. But small things have big effects. Oh, last example. This is from a Harvard Business Review article of Google and Bing just tweaking colors to improve contrast and accessibility. And when they rolled these things out, they're estimating tens to hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue just through these very simple changes. So when I've seen product teams experience some of these successes and failures from small things, they change in a couple of ways how they run their tests. One is they typically try to start small. Doesn't mean they go big sometimes, but they try to start small because they appreciate that these small things can be effective. And when you do small things, you can do them really fast, right? It doesn't take you months to go from one idea to the next. It can take a few days sometimes. And they're way easier for the engineering team to maintain or roll back. The other thing is they test everything. This gets a little contentious for some people. I'm on the camp of just test everything, measure everything as much as you can, at least in your space. I like to think of this as when you start to measure everything changing in your product and putting data around those changes, it's like a business immune system. So I've worked in companies where once you've got that data flowing in, you can put in guardrails and you can put in warning systems, and suddenly anyone shipping anything bad can get caught quite quickly. So you build up this immune system. It builds your company's experience with testing. Testing, A/B testing, sounds simple in concept, but it can be pretty difficult in practice. So just testing even the little things can build up that muscle for everyone. And the nice thing is you can start to get really powerful aggregate insights. So instead of, say, one massive test on this new thing, if you've done 20, 30 tests on all these little things, you can say, hey, which buckets of tests seem to move the needle and what's similar about those things? And you can get way more insight about the changes that are relevant for your customers. There we go. Let's go to the total opposite end of the spectrum. Big changes often fail. Now, this might not apply if you're launching a totally new product or you're a sort of 0 to 1 startup, but for big companies, right, success I've found is built over time. And behind that success are many, many hidden learnings and dependencies. And they stack up. And it's very easy to forget they're there, or if you've onboarded into a new company, you don't even know they're there. And when you really make a massive change to your product, you tend to break all that stuff without realizing. And it doesn't matter how nice it's been designed or how good it feels. This is not my experience. It's just an infamous example of New Coke. I'm not sure who's tried New Coke, but it was one of the biggest flops of the 20th century. If you're not familiar with the story, go check it out. It's not necessarily that New Coke was bad. It's just people were so attached to the brand and the flavor of the original. And so it just totally failed. Something that I was privileged to see was when Booking.com, if you know Booking.com, they went from that top sort of screen down to the bottom. It was in part of a big strategic move to go from just being an accommodation website to a general travel experiences website, so selling accommodation and flights and cars and so on. And they thought they'd go big and totally revamp the website. They ran this through tests and tests and tests for months. And everything they tried absolutely tanked all the business metrics. Now, I'm not going to stand here and say, don't do that, ever. There are some good strategic reasons to do this depending on your business. But you need to be really wary of why you're doing it and what you're trying to achieve. And particularly a company that is publicly listed and you have targets to meet and so on, you need to be very mindful of the impact you're having on your customers and where that market share goes. But this was a massive failure for a long time. It does now look like this. That's a screenshot from now. And another one, de-identified, just another big company, estimated millions, tens of millions of revenue loss because they wanted to go really big promoting this event on their site. And turns out they'd hit in a whole bunch of nudges related to revenue. And so there's no numbers here, but the revenue chart looked a little bit like this, and it freaked everyone out. No one had noticed. And I couldn't help but put this one up. Who still talks about Twitter? I know I do, yeah. In fact, if you Google X, there's still Twitter in all the metadata and, you know. But hey, look, I'm not Elon Musk either, so you can decide whether you call that a big change that failed or not. Teams who have seen this, I tend to see them do a couple things. First is that they iterate their way to success. So it's not that they don't want to go for big changes, but rather than try and build all that change in one bucket and ship, they take smaller steps. And they think about how do we break that vision or where we are today, where we are tomorrow into small pieces and do it like that. By doing that, they capitalize on early opportunities. This is really nice. They can get something out the door fast, and if it's adding value, it's going to capitalize on that. They can isolate those steps, deepening their understanding of what actually matters to customers and what's valuable for the business. And as you go, you can either justify longer-term investment or even prevent it. Right? This is really nice. If you're saying, hey, look, we've broken the problem down, we've run 3 experiments so far, and they're absolutely crushing it, all the metrics are green, great, cool. Look, we could speed this up with another 4 engineers and a designer, and then that investment will come. But if you just go for the big change, you find it very hard to do that. And they gather lots of data. I mean, I'm a data guy, so, you know, everyone gather more data. Please take that message away. But they do. They try to gather as much data as they can, not just the key business metrics, but really everything about every interaction, because it starts to shift emphasis on outcomes, right? The discussion centers around the data that they're gathering and the metrics that they're observing. It becomes a more quantitative discussion instead of, oh, I put out this feature or this design. It's more, I move these metrics. It really deepens your understanding of why. Right? You can explore the data of how people are interacting with your product, and you can go into really niche little pieces and develop really amazing new hypotheses that you would not have gathered otherwise. You know, things like going out and sitting next to your customer are fantastic and do it, but it's also hard to scale and hard to do all the time, right? So having all that data is like an extra bonus that you can get into. Right, and same thing. You can learn new things. All right, failure is the price of success. This is one of my favorites. It's been mentioned a few times. I think Dan talked about innovation. Everyone's saying they're doing innovation and they're not really. Innovation is hard. If it was easy, everyone would do it, right? It's not easy. And success comes to those who can fail a lot and learn from that failure. It's not just fail, 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 fail. You need to fail and learn from that failure. And it often takes a lot of failure to truly innovate. And just some numbers for you. I think this is one of the talks I have the fewest numbers in ever, but I do have some numbers. These types of companies run a lot of experiments. If you've not worked at them or you're not familiar with them, just some examples. These are from quite a while ago, but at the time, Booking was running 1,000 concurrent, that refers to A/B tests. 1,000 A/B tests right now, at the same time, all around the world. That's a lot of testing. Today, it's probably possibly double that. That's the chart below is from Bing. It ends in 2014 at 300 concurrent tests. So, and you can see the exponential growth, similar numbers. It's a bit mind-blowing when you see these numbers. It's like, wow, they're running thousands of tests every single day. And of those thousands of tests, very few succeed. So these are public numbers. You can go through them. In general, the success rate here is about 1 in 10. They're saying 1 in 10 of the tests we run moves our metrics in a way that is positive for our customers and our business. 1 in 10 is a success. That's 9 failures for every success. So you want to be able to fail really fast and get through all those failures really fast and learn along the way to get to those successes. So how do those teams do that? This is what I tend to observe. They test a lot of ideas, right? They don't just test one thing. They go, all right, let's think about the problem, like we talked about a lot today. Maybe we've come up with this particular solution, but what are maybe 2 or 3 other ways this solution could manifest? And they'll try and test them all at the same time if they can. It covers a lot more ground faster. It creates space for riskier bets, right? When instead of having to put all your all the eggs in one basket, all your energy into one solution, if you can go and test 2 or 3 things, then you get the creativity flowing in the team. It's cool, let's try one thing here that's a little bit out there, a little bit different. And you're going to learn a lot more, because if you have slight variations of the solutions that you're testing and you see maybe 1 or 2 of them do well and some of the others not do well, you can start to ask, what is it? What made these different? And you're going to learn a lot more. This is maybe a little unpopular with lots of people because no one has time or likes to do documentation, but I really encourage everyone to write more documentation. These teams document their learnings a lot, right? They write down what were their hypotheses, why did they test certain solutions, what results came through, and what did they learn from it. One thing I think is really valuable here is it makes that competitive knowledge accessible. And when I said teams like this go through 9 failures for every success, I can guarantee you that every competitor in market probably goes through very similar ideas. And so when you document those failures down, every person who joins the company can come in and skip through all the stuff that they probably would have gone through already. They could go, all right, I see what was done here, I see where we failed. So you make that knowledge accessible in your company. It's very powerful. When you document your hypotheses and your learnings, it forces you to think very clearly and be able to articulate it and explain it to others, which is great. As product people, right, we need to be able to articulate this to the rest of our team. It's very useful for that. And the other thing is it allows failure to be celebrated. Fear of failure is a real problem, especially for those of us in product. And when you start to document this stuff, you go, okay, here's why we thought something was going to work. Here's what we did. Here's the result. It failed. Here's what we learned and why we're moving on to the next step. That's a very different discussion to we spent 3 months trying to build this thing and it tanked and we don't know what to do next, right? So when you have those documented learnings, you can really start to celebrate failure, because maybe a year down the line, you've learned enough to reach those successes and move the needle, and you can point to a year behind and go, here's the document, here's when we really learned the thing we needed to know to get on the right path. All right, assumption testing rules. I'm going to change up that initial slide a little bit. So remember, there are no guarantees. Everything is an assumption, and we all know the saying, assumptions make an ass out of you and me. Thank you. I'm just curious, who's familiar with this picture? Yeah, about half the room. Cool. So you know what I'm going to talk about. For everyone else, in World War II, I think this was British Air Force were finding that fighter pilots were returning back to base, and every mark, every red spot represents a bullet hole. And they made the assumption that these were the vulnerable parts of the aircraft, and so they started to reinforce them. But that didn't seem to change the rates of aircraft going down. This has become a very famous example of something known as survivorship bias, because those bullet holes represent the aircraft that survived in battle. And actually, it's the other areas around the fuel tanks that were the vulnerable parts that needed to be reinforced. And so that assumption of not sort of probing deeper into the data was quite fatal. All right, that's a bit of a morbid example. Let's move on to something a little more lighthearted. This is one of my favorites. This is from the team at Booking.com. So again, if you'd used Booking.com in the past, you might recognize this design. And a team was tasked with this is the home page at the time, they were tasked with trying to optimize this panel on the right side. And that team spent months, if not a year, trying all sorts of stuff. What if we changed the design? What if we changed the components? What if we introduced better ranking, introduced machine learning? Like, you name it, they had to go at it. If it were today, they'd be like, what if we threw Gen AI at it? It's like, they were going to try everything. And they did, and they really got nowhere. And a very close colleague of mine at the time said, why are we doing this? Oh, because customers use this thing and it helps them find cool cities and et cetera, et cetera. It's like, how sure are we of that? It turns out that was just a deeply held assumption in the company from day one. And so they said, you know what? Let's put that assumption to the test. And they removed the whole panel off the page. And everything went up. Bookings went up. Crazy, right? And he's like, oh, so not only have we found something that removes distractions and improves the customer experience, but we can also reallocate our entire engineering resources from this thing we thought mattered to stuff that probably does matter more. A sort of really interesting example I saw at Canva. Those of you who's used Canva, is one of the most amazing things of Canva is there are all these templates, no matter what you're creating. Decks, social media posts, whiteboards, whatever. There's templates for everything. You never have to start from scratch. So there's a lot of templates. A lot of them never get used. And so there's a lot of data there that has to be loaded, and that creates engineering challenges, like from an infrastructure point of view, and costs and all this sort of stuff. And so someone said, well, you know what? No one's using it. Let's get rid of it. Let's reduce all that burden, clean up the experience. Luckily, the team put it through a test, and it turns out that it was wrong. By removing this additional choice, even though it wasn't necessarily the thing the customer wanted, by seeing the choice and being able to compare with other options, metrics went in a negative direction, right? Less people were creating designs and so on. It's sort of like, in sales, they're like, throw in a really expensive option so that the thing you care about, people buy, right? So just because someone doesn't use something doesn't mean it's not important. And this was a perfect example of where that assumption had gone wrong. Right, so product teams who have seen this and experienced this, what I tend to see them doing is they ask why a lot. We've heard that a few times today. They ask why. So if someone comes up with a solution or a particular design, they're more inclined to go, why did you do it this way? Why are you focused on this part of the product or so on? To be fair, there's a little bit of an art in doing this in a friendly way. Some people can get a little combative, so don't take this lesson as go and start yelling why at everyone, but probe the why. And when you start to ask this, you're going to surface those hidden assumptions. It's going to improve your and everyone's thinking and reasoning about the problem and the solutions being developed. And I find it often leads to better solutions. I even do this with myself now a lot, and it can improve your thinking because as humans, we're not naturally geared towards pushing into the why by ourselves. Like, our brains are very lazy. Sorry, I'm getting in psychologist mode. Anyway, let's get back into product mode. The other thing that they do, which I think is extremely powerful, is they try to directly test that why. Once they've asked why and they've got to some of those assumptions, they don't go and build a solution. They don't like go and do these beautiful mock-ups and say, here's the end product and this is what we're going to test. They say, how do we change our product in a way that will let us learn whether that assumption is actually valid or not? So you saw some of the examples of like, just remove the whole panel. Or, silly example, but if you think you have a button on your, let's say, digital product, and you think that button's really important, get rid of it. Or make it fluoro pink. Move it somewhere on the screen, right? You may not be getting the product to the end state that you want, which is fine, but you're going to learn an enormous amount about whether that button is valuable to your customers. So when you test these assumptions, you really learn way more than when you just put a single solution out. All you learn when you put a single solution out often is, did this thing that I built work or not? It's a very powerful way to validate or invalidate entire problem and solution spaces very quickly, right? You get right down to the root of what's the problem or solution space that I care about, and you test that, and then you can very quickly wipe out a whole months and months of work. Again, it puts the focus on results over output. How do I move the needle on certain metrics? What are the things that resonate with customers in this way? All right, last lesson. Local optimization is dangerous. I've come to learn this is a little bit of a spicy thing. I lean very much in the camp of what I'm about to share. If you disagree with me, you're welcome to. I'll argue with you later. That's fine. I've been there. Someone said they'd heckle me. I don't think they have time for that. Sorry. Anyway, the lesson here that I found is your product, feature, page, whatever it is not your business. And so you can find evidence that you might be improving your product or feature or page or whatever it is, or customers are using it more or whatever. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's better for your business either. And I'll give you some examples. This is just, I'm not going to tie this to a company because I've seen this at every company I've worked for. Every customer support team in the world at some point has the goal of reducing tickets. And every product team who works with them thinks, let's hide the phone number. Always. That'll do it. You'll reduce tickets to zero. I'm hoping everyone knows this example. And when you really logically think it out, you're like, well, that's not a good idea, of course. Like, yes, we'll reduce tickets to zero. We'll also reduce customer support to zero. And everyone's going to be really, really upset with us, and they'll probably go off somewhere else. Right? So this locally optimizing for reducing tickets sounds good in theory, but you can do things that are actually globally for your business quite harmful and your customers. I saw an example where an onboarding team absolutely freaked because they were so myopically focused on this activation rate metric of all the new people who showed up, how many activated, and this whole thing tanked. But it was actually being driven by a marketing team who was sending a new type of customer to the website, which when you followed it through to the overall active users was a good thing. But they were so intensely focused on this thing, they just forgot all the context around them. And they ended up spending weeks of data analysts' resources trying to dive in and figure it out. But this was a case where their local goal or metric was negative, but globally was a good thing. And another company that I worked at, they were just very focused on one product vertical in the portfolio. And they were doing a great job. They're like, guys, we've like tripled sales in our product vertical. And FP&A finance team stepped in and they're like, yeah, but you've crushed our margins. Fix that now, sort of. So again, and that's a perfectly okay thing to do in some businesses, but in this case, it was not the intention and it was not good for the business. So this local optimization was harmful globally. So companies or teams who I've seen do this and appreciate this, they tend to use global metrics, at least as guardrails, at the very least. This is really, really powerful way to align everyone's activities to a single like North Star type of thing. It forces very deep thinking about how does my work in my page or my feature ladder up to a global level, and it makes impact much easier to compare across teams. The other thing I see them do is they ignore ownership. This is maybe a strong way to say it, but if your team is responsible for, say, a page or a particular feature, those teams don't feel locked into only being able to work on that thing. They will gladly go and mess with other teams' products or features to achieve a common goal. They do it in a very polite way. They go and ask the team and so on, but they think beyond their own features. So it removes constraints on the ideas they have, and it gets them, again, focused on results. How do we move the global metric? And it actually improves collaborations. You get engineers playing in each other's code bases. You get to know each other's spaces and problems, and so on. So that's there. The slides come out, I think, if you want a little single page of everything. And that's my LinkedIn if you want to come connect. Thank you so much, and thank you to the conference for having me.